students. So today in this module we'll be studying about the process of oogenesis. Now what is the oogenesis? It is the process of formation of haploid ovum from diploid oogonia cells in the ovary, and that is termed to be oogenesis. Now you can see here students in the I have made this flow chart in order to clarify this concept to you in a more better way. Fine. So now exactly what happens, this oogenesis is initiated during the embryonic development stage when a couple of million gametes mother cell oogonia are formed within each fetal ovary. Fine. So you can see here the first one is oogonia, students. Now these cells starts division and enters into prophase 1. Fine. Of the meiotic division, where they get temporarily arrested. Fine. And that this stage is known as primary oocyte. So you can see here the second one is primary oocyte. Then students, each primary oocyte then gets surrounded by a layer of granulosa cells, and they are known as primary follicles at this stage. Then a large number of these follicles degenerate during the phase from birth to puberty. Therefore, at puberty, only 60,000 to 80,000 primary follicles are left in each ovary. Now students, the primary follicles, they get surrounded by more layer of granulosa cell and a new theca. And now here at this stage, they are known as secondary follicles. So you can see here, look here students, these are the secondary follicles. Fine. Now what happens, the secondary follicles soon transforms into the tertiary follicles, which is characterized by a fluid filled cavity, and this is known as antrum. Now students, the theca layer is organized into an inner theca interna and an outer theca that is known as externa. Now here what happens, it is the stage that where the primary oocyte within the tertiary follicles grows in size and completes its first meiotic division. Now students, it is an unequal division. Fine. Resulting into the formation of a large haploid secondary oocyte and a tiny first polar body. Okay. Where the secondary oocyte retains bulk of the nutrients rich cytoplasm of the primary oocyte, and at the tertiary follicle further changes into the mature follicle, or we can say the Giraffian follicle. Now students, the secondary oocyte, it forms a new membrane that is called as zona pellucida that surrounds it, and the Giraffian follicle now ruptures to release the secondary oocytes that is known as ovum from the ovary, and with the help of a process that is known as ovulation. Fine. So you can see here, these are the different follicles, students. These are the development of these follicles. Initially we were having these primary oocytes. Fine. Then development of oocyte and follicles. Fine. We have already studied this thing. Initially primary follicles formed, then secondary follicles, then tertiary follicles, then secondary oocytes. Fine. And finally a mature ovum, or the egg is formed with the help of the process that is known as ovulation. Fine. And there is a rupture of this follicle which is known as corpus luteum. Finally it gets degenerated and the whole process keeps on repeating. This takes place inside the ovary. I hope this thing is clear, students. Now this is the diagram that we'll be studying. Fine. The primary germ cell with diploid chromosomes, they divide mitotically to form the oogonia. Fine. Then this diploid primary oocyte, after maturation, it undergoes two maturation division. Fine. That we'll be studying now. So look here students, this is what the complete oogenesis has been shown here and described. I have already explained you the definition. Now oogenesis starts during embryonic stage. Fine. Germinal epithelium of ovary, it divides mitotically to produce millions of gamete mother cells, or oogonia. So you can see here, these are the oogonia or the gamete mother cells. And remember one thing students, which is very important here, that no oogonia formed or added after birth. Fine. Now oogonia enters into meiosis 1. It proceeds prophase 1 and gets suspended and forms primary oocytes. Fine. So you can see here the primary oocyte. Now students, during puberty, the primary oocytes restarts its first meiotic division. Fine. And oogenesis takes place by 3 stages. So the first one we have is multiplicative phase, second one we have is the growth phase, and third one we have having is the maturation phase. Fine. So what happens in case of multiplication phase? You can see here certain primary germ cells, which are large size and nuclei of germinal epithelium lining ovary, they undergo rapid mitotic division. Fine. So there is a mitotic division. Fine. किसका mitotic division होता है students? These primary germ cells. Fine. And it results into the formation of a group of diploid egg mother cell, which is known as oogonia. Because it is a mitotic division, so this is an equational division. That is why if this is diploid, this is also diploid. This will also be diploid. Fine. You can see here all the oogonia are represented by the 2n structure. Now each group of cells forms a rounded mass called egg nest. Fine. Now second we have is the growth phase. Maturation phase, multiplicative phase is clear to each one of you students, where these oogonia divides by the mitosis and forms the oogonium forms the oogonia. Fine. Now talking about the growth phase, which lasts for 12 to 13 years, where what happens, one of the diploid oogonia, fine, oogonia, this is the oogonia students, look here carefully, it undergoes growth, increasing in cytoplasm and accumulation of yolk and transform to enlarged oogonia, that is called primary oocyte. Fine. So this oogonia, after this growth phase, it forms the primary oocyte. Now students, other oogonia form single layered follicular epithelium, that is known as primary follicles, and these primary follicles surrounded by more granulosal cells known as secondary follicles. Now this secondary follicles, it's a fluid filled kind of follicle with the cavity that is known as antral cavity. Fine. Which becomes the tertiary follicles. And finally this tertiary follicles forms the Graafian follicles. Fine. Students, always remember one thing, that when oogonia stops dividing, they are called oocytes, and in each clusters of oocytes only one enters to the growth phase, and that is known as primary oocyte. So only one will enter. Fine. And that is known as primary oocyte. I hope this thing is clear. Now what will happen to the remaining, while these remaining oocytes, they form follicular cells. Fine. जो आपको भी explain किया है मैंने, and they provide nourishment to the developing ovum or the primary oocyte. Fine. Coming to the next students, here is the maturation phase. So a fully grown primary oocyte, it undergoes the first meiotic division that results into the formation of two unequal sized haploid cells. So you can see here students, this primary oocyte, which is diploid, it undergoes the first meiotic division and it results into the two unequal size haploid cells. So you can see here it results into the haploid cells. One is very small and another one is large. So the large secondary oocyte, fine, this is the secondary oocyte that has been formed after the meiosis division, and the small polycyte, or we can say the first, this polar body. Fine, this is the polar body. Now students, this secondary oocyte, it undergoes the second meiotic division to form a ovum. Fine, to form a ovum and a small second polar body. Now students, secondary oocytes, you can see where is the secondary oocyte, this one. So this secondary oocytes forms new membrane, zona pellucida. Fine. And what happens? The first polar body also undergoes equal division to produce two cells. So this is the first polar body students. Fine. I would like to show this thing with the help of another diagram students. Look here. So this is the first polar body. Fine. This first polar body, it gets divided into two polar bodies. Fine. So there are total 3 polar bodies now. Is this thing clear to each one of you students? Now what happens? Thus during oogenesis, 4 cells are produced. Among them, 1 is functional, that is the ovum, and 3 are non-functional, that is the polar body. Fine. So this ooted, with very little change, it becomes an ovum. Fine students. Now students, here what is the function of the formation of polar body? We can say that the primary function of formation of polar body is to bring haploidy and to retain most of the cytoplasm in one ovum. Why is it so, students? Because in order to provide food during the development of zygote to form an embryo, a lot of food is required. That is why major amount of cytoplasm is basically present inside the ovum only, and they finally degenerate. All the three polar body, they get degenerated. Fine. Thank you, students.